Have you ever wondered how you would survive if you went back to the Middle Ages when ergotism, St. Anthony's fire, was a disease? It starts the way most bad ideas do with breakfast. You stumble into a musty, dirt-floored cottage in a village that doesn't have plumbing, let alone a bakery worth writing home about. Someone hands you a thick, chewy slice of dark rye bread. It's crusty on the outside and kind of sour inside with a smell that's off. You're starving, so you chew anyway. But halfway through the slice, your fingertips start to itch, then burn, then tingle like you dipped them in nettles. You might not survive. See, what no one told you, and what no one in this village knows, is that the rye crop was infected with a tiny fungus called Claviceps purpurea. It's not obvious like mold or rot. It blends in, hiding in the grooves of the grain. The fungus produces ergot, a hallucinogenic poison that causes everything from convulsions to gangrene to full-blown psychotic breaks. In some cases, it can shut off blood supply to your limbs. You didn't know your bread could amputate you, did you? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I like seeing where everyone's tuning in from around the world. Now find a comfortable place to lie down, turn on a small fan, relax, and let's start our journey tonight. Your first clue that something's wrong comes a few hours later. You're out in the fields, helping the others dig up turnips, and suddenly your left hand goes numb. Not pins and needles numb. We're talking someone else's arm is attached to your body numb. A sharp cramp shoots up your elbow, then another. You drop your spade and stare at your hand. It's turning pink, then red, then kind of purplish. You stumble home. The cottage is filled with smoke from a fire that's just smoldering, not burning. There's no chimney. The air's thick. You lie down on a straw mattress that smells like wet fur, and the burning spreads up your arm. Your foot joins in too, as if your nerves are playing a sadistic game of tag. Must be St. Anthony's fire, someone mutters. You think, fire? I don't remember catching fire. You pass out. Here's the thing. The people around you have no idea this is caused by a fungus. They think it's punishment, or a curse, or divine judgment from St. Anthony himself, a hermit who lived in Egypt and now has a cult following strong enough to get a disease named after him. Monks dedicated to his name build hospitals all over Europe for people like you, people with scorched limbs and wild visions. But no one questions the bread because everyone eats it and everyone's scared. Meanwhile, your body is becoming not your body. You twitch, you cry, you scream things you didn't mean to say. Your mouth tastes metallic and your skin starts peeling like you've had a bad sunburn. A local woman tries to pour oil over your legs to soothe the fire. It doesn't work. Your neighbor Lars says his cousin lost his toes after eating spoiled rye. They blackened and dropped off like dead twigs. He says this while cheerfully gnawing on the same bread. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers truly understood that rye was to blame. Some argue that local wisdom hinted at it, that during wet seasons, people whispered about cursed harvests. Others believe it took centuries to piece together the fungal connection, long after people blamed everything but their breakfast. Here's a weird fact: in small measured doses, ergot can actually be used to help with childbirth. It makes uterine muscles contract. Later in the 20th century, scientists even synthesized LSD from it. So yeah, your foot might fall off, but you might also see God and invent psychedelia. Night falls. The village settles. You can't sleep. There's a low, buzzing sound in your ears, like bees made of metal. You sit up in the dark and swear the walls are breathing. Your arm is bright red, pulsing like it has its own heartbeat. Someone cries out across the village. You hear a scream, then laughter, then nothing. In the days to come, your symptoms will shift. If you're lucky, you'll develop the dry kind of ergotism, hallucinations, seizures, maybe a violent dance or two. If you're unlucky, it's the gangrenous kind, burning dying flesh and the slow death of your limbs. There's no real treatment. Maybe a monk will pray over you. Maybe someone will put a leech on your spine. Maybe you'll be accused of sorcery. But for now, you lie still. Your stomach groans. You ate the bread, and you're starting to regret it. The strange part, no one else seems alarmed. The village has seen this before. An entire winter once where half the town walked with a limp or missing fingers. One summer where children ran screaming into the woods and didn't come back for hours. A baker once who tried to bake pure rye using sacred river water. His hands rotted within weeks. The door creaks open. A man with soot on his face looks in. "You feelin' the fire yet?" he asks. You just nod. Welcome to the slow burn of medieval ergotism. You wake up to the sound of your own groaning. It's morning technically, though the sun isn't shining so much as smearing light through a gray fog outside. You try to move your hand, the one that tingled yesterday, but it doesn't respond. You lift it with your other arm. It flops back down like wet dough. Your fingers are darker now, not just bruised, almost blue-black. They look like overcooked sausages, burnt ends, the kind that snap when you bite them. Except these are still attached to you. Someone in the room is boiling something that smells vaguely like cabbage and bark. You sit up, and the pain hits you like a low drum roll, thumping through your body, from your toes to your temples. Then the real horror begins. Your toes don't work. You wiggle them or try. Nothing. You pull back the wool blanket. Your foot is swollen purple and cracked. It's almost shiny, like someone rubbed it with wax. There are sores forming near the arch. You poke one with your finger and nope. No feeling. Zero. Just skin and silence. A woman walks past the open door and sees your foot. "Ah," she says. The fire has settled in. Nobody even pretends to be shocked. That's what happens when a disease becomes folklore. Ergotism wasn't some random illness to these people. It was part of the scenery. The crops come in, the bread gets baked, and then every few years the burning starts. Maybe someone sees lights in the sky. Maybe someone dances until they collapse. Maybe someone's fingers rot like fruit left in the sun. It's a Tuesday, so what? Someone else in the village is worse off. A man in the next hut woke up screaming, his ears bleeding. Another child went blind. You hear whispers that one woman tried to cut off her own foot with a woodcutting axe to stop the fire from spreading. It didn't work. She died of fever the next day. You think of your foot. Should you cut it off? Before you get the chance, you're dragged out of bed, literally, by two strong arms. You're not under arrest, not yet. They're just taking you to the church. The path is cold. Your bare feet touch muddy earth as you're half carried across the village. The church looms at the far edge of town, built from stone, so thick it seems to drink the morning mist. Inside, candles flicker beside a statue of Saint Anthony, who, let's be honest, doesn't look like he has a plan. You're laid on the stone floor beside others. Dozens of others, children, old women, grown men with stumps where their hands used to be. Everyone's groaning or muttering or twitching. It smells like sweat mold and something sweet like old apples rotting in the cellar. Some of them have the burning limbs. Others have glassy eyes and keep swatting at invisible birds. The monks in charge are wearing dark blue robes with the Tau cross embroidered in red, kind of like a T-shaped stick. They move quietly, chanting prayers, placing compresses on burns, whispering verses. Here's where it gets stranger. This order of monks, known as the Hospitallers of St. Anthony, were among the few in medieval Europe who actually cared for people with ergotism. They ran fire hospitals across France, Germany, and Italy. Some even believed St. Anthony's relics could miraculously cure the afflicted. You're not convinced, but hey, at least you're not alone. One of the monks kneels beside you. His face is deeply wrinkled, his eyes kind. Has it reached the chest, he asks. You shake your head. He nods, touches your foot with 2 fingers, and says, "You'll keep your heart then." You don't ask what that means. A woman near you is whispering frantically. You lean over and catch bits of her speech. Silver frogs in the walls. They told me to eat my dress. Her face is soaked in sweat. Her legs twitch every few seconds, like someone's yanking invisible strings. You look at her and see a preview of yourself. Historians still debate whether these monasteries helped or hurt. Some say their care delayed amputations, prolonged life, and even cured mild cases. Others think their treatments, mostly prayers, oils, and wine, did little more than slow the inevitable. Still, the monks offered something no one else did: kindness. And in a world that blamed every sickness on demons or sin, that was revolutionary. You're offered a piece of blessed bread. You flinch. The monk smiles gently. Wheat, pure, no rye, we know better. You take a cautious bite. It's dry and tasteless, but your stomach sighs with relief. One weird fact: in many monasteries, patients with ergotism were fed fatty meats, wine, and non-rye bread. They were often placed in warm, dry rooms to sweat out the toxins. In some cases, it worked, but it had to be caught early. Your foot, though? Yeah, probably not early enough. Hours pass. You drift in and out of something like sleep. At one point, you open your eyes and a boy across the aisle is levitating. Or is he just twitching violently in a seizure? You're not sure. Your vision flickers like candlelight. Your hands are numb. Your lips feel stiff. The monks return to sing a slow, humming hymn. The words are Latin, but the feeling is more than language. For a brief moment, you forget the pain. Maybe that's the miracle. The church doesn't have beds. It doesn't even have blankets for everyone. You're lying on cold stone with a bundle of straw under your head, surrounded by the slow chorus of people in pain. Coughs, moans, a constant low hum of murmured prayers and nonsense syllables. Occasionally, someone screams. You wake again to the scent of something burning, but not firewood. It's flesh. Somewhere nearby, someone's leg has gone too far. A monk is smearing resin and herbs over a blackened foot, and the patient is unconscious or already past needing to care. You try not to look. Your own foot is a deep purple, now stiff and waxy. But the pain has receded. Is that a good sign, or is your foot just dead? Another monk approaches with a small copper bowl of water and a cloth soaked in lavender oil. He dabs it across your forehead. The smell pulls you back to yourself a little. You feel less like a fever-drenched rag and more like a person. A painful, very confused person. We're taking you to the altar, he says. You're lifted again this time by 4 monks, each one silent as a shadow. They carry you through a long hallway behind the nave. the incense thicker back here, the light thinner. The sound of chanting follows behind like mist. You're not alone. A procession of others are being carried or dragged too, some crawling, some sobbing, all heading toward the shrine of St. Anthony. The altar is modest by cathedral standards, stone, flanked with small candles, and above it, a relic, a bone said to belong to the saint himself. The bone is encased in a golden cross-shaped reliquary behind glass and filigree, and no one dares touch it. This is what people travel hundreds of miles for. This is the beating heart of hope for the afflicted. And right now, you're being laid in front of it like an offering. A group of monks begin a low chant. One walks in a circle, swinging incense from a thurible. The smoke is thick and spicy, and it makes your nose sting. Another places a hand on your chest and begins to pray, not for a cure, you think, but for strength. Or maybe peace. You hear a scream behind you. Someone further back is convulsing, limbs flailing as if yanked by strings. It's the woman who thought frogs lived in her walls. The monks don't flinch. They keep chanting. One moves toward her with a vial of blessed oil. Some people really do get better, or at least survive. Some recover after the bread runs out and the fungus leaves their system. But not all. You look down at your foot again and see a white stripe creeping up your shin. That's not blood. That's necrosis. A monk leans over and whispers, "You may lose the leg, but your soul is safe." Comforting. Still here, in this strange sanctuary, something begins to shift inside you. Not healing exactly, but surrender. You're no longer fighting the pain. You let yourself float. You listen to the hum of the chants, the rhythm of the bells, the flicker of the candlelight painting golden shapes on the walls. For a moment, it almost feels like a dream. Here's a strange historical note. The Hospitallers of St. Anthony were among the first organized medical caretakers for any specific disease in Europe. Long before germ theory, before anesthesia, before surgery became anything but torture, they took in the sick, gave them shelter, and treated them with dignity. Some records even mention clean bedding. That's saying a lot in the 1300s. The atmosphere wasn't sterile, but it was sacred, which back then often mattered more. You drift again, and when you wake, you've been moved. You're now in a smaller room, a sort of side chamber, warmer than the main church, with arched windows letting in morning light. Your leg is bandaged. A monk is seated beside you, writing something on a piece of parchment with a goose feather. "What's that?" you rasp. "An inventory of souls," he replies. You blink. "I mean patience," he says, cracking a smile. But sometimes it's the same thing. The man beside you groans in his sleep. His left hand is missing. Another person across the room is swatting at invisible insects, whispering something about a snake in her stomach. The monk sees your face and nods. Yes. This is what happens when bread goes bad. You manage to sit up slightly, so why don't people stop eating it? The monk shrugs. Because it's the only bread they have. Burn the crop and they starve. Eat the crop and they burn. Historians still debate whether these monks knew the exact cause of ergotism. Some records suggest they suspected rye. Others imply they thought the disease was sent by God and only curable by devotion. And then there are those who believed it was just another burden of life, like winter or plague or taxes. As you lie there, you watch a young boy stand for the first time in days. His mother cheers softly. A small miracle. 2 others haven't moved in hours. You think about your own foot and wonder which path you're on. Then out of nowhere, someone farts loudly. There's a beat of silence. Then the room erupts in laughter. Even the monk snorts. The fire spares no dignity, he says. It's the first time you've laughed in days, maybe weeks, and for a few seconds the weight lifts. The candlelight seems warmer. The world, even in its absurd cruelty, is still capable of humor. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe. You're on your feet, not entirely by choice. You're leaning on a walking stick carved from some bent tree branch, and one of the monks has to steady you by the elbow. But your legs are under you, wobbly and half numb as they are. The church floor is hard and smooth, worn down from centuries of prayers and bare feet. They tell you you're going outside today. Fresh air, the monk says, and the fever's cooled. You blink into the daylight. It feels wrong. Too bright. Too fast. People are already moving about, carrying baskets, mending cloaks, leading donkeys down the road. The world kept turning while you were sprawled out, hallucinating about talking candles and whispering frogs. Your foot, or what's left of it, is bound in linen and herbal paste. It hurts, but it's a dull, manageable kind of pain. You don't look directly at it. The monk leads you to the town square. Then you hear it drums, no rhythm, just scattered frantic beats, like someone slapping a goatskin drum in a panic. A crowd is forming. Villagers have come from neighboring hamlets. Some are clapping, others are just staring slack-jawed. You follow their gaze and you see them. Dancers, at least a dozen people, arms flailing, feet kicking, spinning and stomping and jerking like puppets. Their faces are blank or twisted in confusion. One woman spins herself into a tumble. A man shouts and throws off his shirt. A boy of maybe 12 begins howling as he hops in a circle. You feel a shiver crawl up your spine. Another bout, the monk sighs beside you. It's spreading again. This is the dancing plague, and yes, it was real. It happened across Europe multiple times, especially in places hit hard by famine or fear, or yes, ergot contaminated bread. One of the most famous outbreaks occurred in 1518 in Strasbourg, when dozens, then hundreds, began dancing in the streets. Some danced for hours, others for days, some until their feet bled. A few reportedly dropped dead. Historians still debate whether it was caused by ergot mass psychosis or a social response to crushing despair. Could also be a little of each. You watch the dancers mesmerized. One woman's legs give out. She collapses, but keeps swaying on the ground. Another man spins into a barrel of fish brine, shrieks, and gets up to keep dancing. The drummers keep pounding. They were hired by local officials who believed the best way to burn it out was to let people dance until the frenzy left them. Smart or cruel, you're not sure. You take a shaky step forward, and suddenly your own foot twitches. It's small, barely a flex, but it's a jolt of memory. Your body remembers the rhythm, or at least wants to. The drums are not just music, they're command. You feel it in your spine. No, not again. You force yourself to sit, right on the stone edge of the fountain in the center of the square. A few people glance at you, but mostly keep watching the spectacle. An old woman sits beside you, chewing on what looks like dried pear. She nudges you. You feel it too, don't you? She says, not looking away. The itch in your legs. You nod slowly. Best not to fight it, she says, popping another pear slice into her mouth. But if you do tie yourself to a tree. Worked for me back in '93. You glance around. A few monks are trying to corral the dancers. One is handing out jugs of water. Another tries to wrap a bleeding foot. And now the weirdest fact of all, in some towns, they built stages for the dancers. They brought in musicians, created designated dancing zones, and tried to let the plague exhaust itself. like a party you couldn't leave except you didn't want to be invited in the first place. You hear laughter. A boy is dancing in front of a donkey cart, arms flapping like wings. Someone throws a cabbage at him. He dodges without missing a beat. You glance back at the monk who brought you here. He's watching, arms crossed. Sometimes they recover, he says. Sometimes they don't. And if I start, you ask. He raises an eyebrow. You'll need strong rope or stronger friends. A scream breaks the rhythm. One dancer collapses shaking. His eyes are wide open, but his mouth is still smiling. The monk sighs. The villagers know. Some mutter prayers, others laugh nervously. You hear someone whisper that it's the devil's music, that the dancers are caught in a curse. Someone else says it's the rye, but nobody's sure. Not really. It's all guesses and ghosts. You sit very still, grounding yourself. You focus on the water in the fountain, the shape of the clouds, the pressure of the stone against your thighs. Anything to hold your body in the present moment. But the drumming, it wants you. Your legs twitch again, not dancing yet, but remembering. Then as suddenly as it started, the music stops. A sharp whistle from one of the monks. The drummers lower their hands. The spell breaks. The dancers slow. Some fall to the ground, gasping. Others wander off, dazed. Your own legs relax. The old woman beside you pats your arm. Good job, she says. You stayed seated. You nod, still breathless from the non-dance you didn't even mean to attempt. In the distance, bells ring out from the chapel. Evening is coming. You don't know what tomorrow holds, but at least you didn't collapse in a fish barrel. Today that feels like a win. The hallucinations start after sunset. You're lying on a pile of musty wool wrapped in 2 layers of borrowed blankets. Your foot has stopped hurting, which by now you understand is a bad sign. The monks gave you something bitter to chew earlier, a mix of bark and flour paste, meant to calm the nerves. But as the stars rise, your thoughts slide sideways. At first, it's small things. The rafters above your head are warping, not creaking. The candle flame beside you flickers into a shape, no, a face. It leans toward you, whispering something in a language you almost understand. You close your eyes. When you open them again, your hands are covered in fur. You blink. Nope, still fur. Your fingers curl into claws. You try to speak, but your mouth is filled with teeth. Too many teeth. You roll over and see a small lizard crawling up the wall, except it turns its head and speaks in your mother's voice. What have you done, it says. What did you eat? Your heart hammers. You reach for your foot, but it isn't there anymore. Instead, there's a hoof, a goat's hoof. You scream, but only inside your head. Congratulations. You've entered the psychoactive phase of ergotism. See, the same ergot fungus that makes your limbs rot also produces lysergic acid, alkaloids, compounds with effects not so different from LSD. In the right dose, your world bends. In the wrong dose, it collapses entirely. One monk told you the devil lives in the bread. Now you're starting to believe him. You blink again, and the room shifts. You're no longer in a monastery. You're in a cave. The stone walls pulse like lungs. Vines crawl along the ceiling and whisper secrets. A bowl of soup beside you contains not broth, but hundreds of blinking eyes. You reach for a spoon and pull out a snake instead. It hisses once. This is your punishment, and slithers down your leg. Your body begins to float. You look down and see the room from above. There's your body still curled under blankets. There's the monk asleep by the hearth. There's the shadow climbing over your chest. Wait. You jolt awake. Sweat drenches your tunic. You sit up, gasping. Everything looks normal now. Stone floor, quiet fire, candles, but your mouth tastes like honey and metal, and your fingers are twitching. And next to you, a woman is whispering. She's holding something wrapped in cloth. You lean closer and realize it's a loaf of bread. Crumbling, gray-speckled, and visibly wrong. I ate it, she says, tears in her eyes. It told me to. You want to tell her to throw it away, to burn it, to run. But she just rocks back and forth, the bread cradled like a baby. Later that night, a man runs through the chapel screaming about his missing ears. He tries to climb the wall. The monks restrain him, gently murmuring prayers. Historians still debate whether the hallucinations from ergotism were entirely caused by the fungus, or whether starvation, dehydration, and religious terror made things worse. Either way, the symptoms were terrifyingly real. One chronicler wrote of people seeing horned beasts in their bedding, or being visited by angels who whispered fire into their blood. Another man believed his wife had turned into a tree. He tried to water her daily until she died. You close your eyes again. This time, you're in a field of rye. Each stalk is whispering your name. You reach out to touch one, and the heads turn toward you, small, eyeless faces with crooked smiles. We're inside you, they say. We're growing. You scream, this time aloud. A monk comes running. He grabs your shoulders, steadying you. It's not real, he says gently. You're still here. You're safe. You sob into his robes. Your whole body trembles. It takes hours to come down. Dawn creeps through the windows like a silent apology. You haven't slept, but the visions are fading. Your hands look like hands again. The floor stays where it should. The fire no longer talks. And then you hear laughter. The woman with the bread is giggling now. She's chewing a chunk of it and rocking in place. You crawl over, snatch it from her hands, and toss it into the hearth. The flames sizzle and crackle violently. She sobs once and collapses. The monks say nothing. They've seen this before. You sit against the wall, exhausted. One monk drops a blanket over your shoulders. You made it through the night, he says. You nod slowly. You don't trust your mouth to speak. Strange fact. Some medieval folk believed these hallucinations were divine messages. Saints, demons, angels, ancestors, trying to speak through the fire. Some were even praised for their visions, becoming local prophets for a while, until their minds snap. You just want it to stop. You watch the hearth for a while. The smoke smells sweeter now. By midday, you're sitting in a wooden cart filled with hay and salt sacks, bumping your way toward the next village over. The monks say the worst has passed. Your legs still attached barely, and you're no longer seeing snakes in the rafters or trees whispering insults. But people are suspicious, not just curious, suspicious. You're leaving the monastery not because you're cured, but because you're uncomfortable to have around. One of the village elders even made a throat-cutting motion when the monks weren't looking. You don't blame him. You were screaming about lizards and dead babies just 2 nights ago. Now you sit quietly watching the trees blur past. The driver, a wiry man named Frick, says nothing. Just chews on a piece of bark and spits into the road every few minutes. The cart creaks with every bump. When you arrive in the new village, just past a thin forest and a crooked bridge, the first thing you hear is a gasp, then whispers. Is that the one from up north? The one with the fire leg? Didn't they say she birthed a demon? You keep your head down. This village is worse off than the last one. You can tell by the smell, less bread, more dung. Children with swollen bellies, chickens that look too tired to cluck, and far, far too many crosses marking fresh graves along the chapel wall. They give you a small hut to sleep in, really just a lean-to next to a tanner's shop, and food that looks like someone tried to stew a shoe. You eat it anyway. Better a boiled boot than another slice of cursed rye. But something's off here. People stare, not just at you, at each other. No one trusts anyone. You hear muttered accusations. Women clutch their children tighter. The local priest talks about evil walking in human skin. Then after your second night, it happens. A girl vanishes, just disappears. 1 minute she's playing near the well, the next she's gone. Her mother wails. Villagers search the woods with torches. No sign. Only a scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush. They blame the usual suspects: wolves, bandits, demons. And you. Someone throws a rock at your door. You don't sleep that night. You sit up listening, hand on a stick, sharpened at one end. Just in case. By morning, the whispers have grown teeth. You pass the baker, and he crosses himself. The blacksmith refuses to sharpen your walking stick. A child points at you and says, "Witch." Here it comes. You've read this story before. Well, lived it now. The intersection between ergotism and witchcraft hysteria is not just a weird historical coincidence. It's part of how human beings make sense of terror they can't explain. You burn your foot on a poisoned loaf, that's bad luck, but your neighbor's crops die, and his wife dances in the night after you arrive. That's not illness, that's intent. Historians still debate whether ergotism directly fed the witch panics of the late medieval and early modern period. Some claim mass poisonings and hallucinations were mistaken for possession and maleficium. Others argue that famine and misogyny played far stronger roles. Either way, when people start acting strangely, someone gets blamed. And that someone is usually a woman or a stranger or both. In this case, you. On the third morning, a crowd gathers outside your hut. Torches, pitchforks, a chicken. You're not sure what the chicken's for. They pull you out into the square. You're too weak to run, too sore to fight. You try to speak, but someone slaps you before you can finish a sentence. She burned with the fire, someone says. She cursed the girl. She walks with the dead. You know what this is. It's not a trial. It's a sentence. But then just as they raise a rope, there's a shout. A boy bursts from the woods, dirty and panting. "She's alive," he cries. The girl, she's in the hollow. Everyone freezes. A few men break from the crowd, sprinting toward the trees. Moments later, they return carrying the girl scraped up, but alive. She'd fallen in a ravine, chased a rabbit too far. The crowd, still holding torches, suddenly looks very embarrassed. A woman mutters, "Maybe we got carried away." Another spits and walks off. You're left in the mud, still tied at the wrists. Eventually, a monk from the monastery arrives. Word travels fast and helps you up. He cuts your bindings and says, "People are strange when they're scared." You nod. That at least makes sense now. Here's the strangest fact during witch trials across Europe. People often confess to crimes that made no sense: flying through the air, making cows miscarry, sleeping with demons. Some scholars believe ergot-induced hallucinations may have played a role. If your bread makes you believe you birthed a lizard, and your priest confirms it's the devil, how do you not confess? Later that night, you sit outside the hut, bandaged hands shaking, still tasting ash. You look up at the moon and wonder how close you came to hanging for a dinner roll. You're back on the road again, not by choice. After the near-hanging incident and the awkward torch-carrying apologies that followed, you figured it was time to move on. That's the thing about medieval villages. Forgiveness isn't usually baked into the system, especially not for someone with a blackened foot and a history of hallucinating reptiles. So now you're walking. Or limping, really. through a patch of dense forest where the trees all seem to lean inward, whispering secrets just out of reach. It's early spring, the kind of season that smells like wet bark and last year's regrets. Your staff thuds softly on the damp earth as you pass moss-covered rocks and startled birds. Ahead, smoke rises, not from a chimney from fields. When you reach the clearing, you see them rows and rows of scorched stubble. Blackened rye stalks still curl upward like burnt fingers. A group of villagers' faces covered in damp cloths are setting fire to the edges of their fields. A man waves you off as you approach. Stay back. This patch is cursed. What happened, you ask, voice raw. The crop went black. We saw spots on the bread, he says, eyeing you warily. Better to burn the field than bury the village. You nod. You get it. It's an early form of biosecurity in the loosest sense of the word. When famine meets fear, fire becomes medicine. One man throws a torch into the rye and says, last year we had dancing. This year we'll have smoke. You find a spot on a low stone wall and sit watching the flames crackle and lick the sky. The smoke stings your eyes, but it's strangely satisfying, like watching a fever break. Here's the weird part, they're not wrong. Burning contaminated fields was one of the few things people stumbled upon that actually worked. Not because they understood ergot, but because superstition accidentally aligned with science. Fire destroyed the fungal spores, cleared the land, and if you were lucky, didn't take the whole village with it. First time a boy beside you asks, you glance over. He's about 12. Dirt on his face. One eyebrow singed off. With the fire, you reply. He shakes his head with the cursed grain. You hesitate. No, not the first. He nods like that means something. We had goats walk backward last month. My sister tried to marry a tree. That's when Da said it was time to burn. You want to laugh, but it's not funny. Not really. Another man walks past, carrying a heavy sack. They say if you burn it wrong, it spreads through the smoke. You flinch. That seems unlikely, but it's also 1348 or something, and no one here knows what a fungus is. Historians still debate whether these burnings were widespread or isolated. There are records of whole communities torching their food supply out of desperation. Others buried grain in consecrated ground or floated it downriver as a sacrifice, anything to stop the madness. One village legend says dumped all their bread into a well and poisoned their water supply for a generation. As you sit, an older woman with soot on her cheeks offers you a boiled root. It tastes like sadness and dirt, but you chew slowly. Did you lose anyone, she asks. You nod. You've lost pieces of yourself, even if they're still technically attached. The fire spreads. A few men shout as sparks jump a hedge. Someone throws a blanket over it. Crisis averted. You notice they've left one field untouched. Why not burn that one too, you ask. The woman shrugs. It's the Lord's grain. You frown. The church? No, she says, smirking. The actual Lord. That one's for tithes. So even when the bread is cursed, taxes remain holy. You lie back in the grass and watch the smoke rise. A hawk circles overhead. The smell of fire fills your nostrils, but it's different from the burning you remember. Cleaner, controlled, chosen. It's almost peaceful until someone screams. A boy near the edge of the field has collapsed. His limbs jerk, his mouth foams, eyes rolled back. Immediately, people rush to him. Someone mutters a prayer. Another says, it's too late. He ate it. The mother wails. He only had a crust. And there it is. A reminder that even as the fields burn, the past still lingers in the pantry. You help carry him to a shaded hut near the back of the village. A woman starts boiling herbs. A man crushes dried flowers. Someone ties a ribbon around the boy's wrist to confuse the demon. You sit in the corner watching. You've been here before on both sides of this. Later, someone tells you that he survived, or maybe he didn't. In these stories, details slip. But the important part is this: the villagers are scared, but they're doing something, for better or worse. You stay the night in a loft above the smokehouse. It smells like ash and fish, but it's warm. As you drift off, your foot aches, a dull reminder that the fire doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes you carry it with you. You're dreaming again. This time, it's not demons or dancing. It's a loaf of bread. It's massive, larger than a cart, and it's walking toward you on stubby rye legs. Its crust cracks open like a mouth, and it says, "I forgive you." Then it explodes into beetles. You wake up gagging. It's still dark, but not silent. Outside your loft window, voices rise and fall in a low chant. You pull yourself up, careful not to bump your bad foot, and peer outside. The villagers are gathered in the clearing around a deep pit. Lanterns sway in the night breeze. Something heavy is being carried, wrapped in cloth and leaves. They're burying the bread, not just tossing it away, ceremonially interring it like it's a cursed relic or a dead relative. You limp down the stairs, curiosity outweighing common sense. A woman notices you and motions you over. "Help if you can," she says. "No one should bury alone." You nod and move toward the pit. Inside, you see piles of blackened loaves, some oozing gray mold, others shattered and dry. It smells like sour beer and decay. A man beside you tosses in another bundle. Crumbs cascade like sand. They're murmuring something as they work. A prayer, a curse. You can't tell, but it feels ancient, the rhythm of a habit learned across generations of trial and terror. "Why not burn it?" you ask quietly. A man near you shakes his head. Smoke carries spirits. Bread needs stillness, rest. Another says the land must hold it. Let the earth remember. You stare into the pit, trying not to vomit. It's hard to explain how spiritual food becomes when it betrays you. Bread is life. Bread is communion. Bread is safety until it's not. And when it turns, it's not just poison, it's treason. This ritual, it's not superstition, it's grief. Historians still debate whether these practices were symbolic or actual attempts to contain the fungus. Did villagers truly believe burial would end the suffering, or was it a kind of mass therapy, a way to say we didn't deserve this even as their bodies begged to differ? You help cover the pit with a blanket of soil and stones. A boy presses wildflowers into the dirt. A girl drops a copper coin on top. They light no candles, they say no names. But it's a funeral, make no mistake. Afterward, the village elder invites you to sit by the hearth. You're given a cup of barley tea and a piece of new bread made from millet. It crumbles differently. It tastes like defeat and improvisation. But it's warm and it doesn't make your skin burn. Small wins. The elder sighs. "We tried to pray it away," she says. "Then we tried to work it away. Now we bury." You nod. "You've been through each stage." She continues. "Once we sent the bad loaves downriver. Thought if we gave it back to the water, it'd float to hell. Did it work, you ask? We didn't have a plague that year," she says. "But we also didn't eat. That's the impossible balance. Starve or suffer, eat poison or eat nothing." A boy pokes his head in. It's in the well. The elder curses. People scramble outside. You follow. A few men shine torches into the village well. A single soggy loaf floats near the surface, its crust sloughing off into cloudy trails. "How did it get in?" someone whispers. "Someone's hoarding," another says. Maybe it's the girl someone else adds. She's new. Ah, you again. The elder silences them with a hand. No one gets blamed unless I say so. Get the tongs. A long hook is used to fish the loaf out. The well is emptied by the bucketful. It'll take hours. But they'll do it, because one slice could kill half the village. A monk once told you that cursed bread is the devil's currency. But it's not just about demons. It's about survival. A mold becomes a monster. A crust becomes a coffin. Later, you help hang warning signs near the field. No harvest, blessed fallow, do not tread. You're invited to carve a symbol into the stone marker they'll place over the bread pit. You choose a sun with a closed eye in the middle. It feels right. A woman beside you etches a loaf with teeth. And another weird fact, some people treated ergot bread like a living thing. They spoke to it, cursed it, sang to it, tried to bribe it with honey or drown it in wine. Desperation creates strange religions. That night you sleep by the hearth. No dreams, no twitching, no snakes. Just the steady breath of the village rising and falling around you. The bread is gone, for now. The next morning, everything feels a bit off. It's the way the light filters through the trees, soft but uneven. The air smells like damp earth and something sweet, but underneath you catch a trace of smoke. The bread pit, now sealed and forgotten by most, still lingers in your lungs. Your foot hurts more than usual. It's a constant reminder that you're not invincible, not even close. And it's a bit too quiet, the kind of quiet that's either a blessing or a sign of something worse. The village is going about its work. Some of the men are preparing for the next season's planting. Others are mending nets or making tools. The women wrapped in their shawls are setting up their stations by the river, washing clothes or weaving. But there's a nervous energy in the air. It's the way people glance at each other, at the soil at their hands. They're waiting for the return of the fire, waiting for the bread to come back and haunt them. You overhear fragments of conversation. He'll be coming tomorrow. They say he's from the church. No, it's someone higher. A man walks by clutching a rolled-up parchment. He's wearing the garb of a town official, a cap with an emblem you don't recognize. Your stomach tightens. You know who's coming now. The church. Your foot throbs. The man disappears into the center of the village, where the elder is speaking to another, more familiar figure, the local priest. You hesitate, but decide to approach. They glance at you with little concern, but you can tell the priest is uneasy. His hands tremble as he flips through his book, muttering prayers under his breath. Did you know it would come to this? You ask, your voice quieter than you intended. The elder looks at you, her face unreadable. Some things we can't prevent. The land has spoken. Section 9. You've seen plague, fire, exile, and exorcism, but now you meet something rare in this era: curiosity. It starts with a knock. You're still recovering in the village, helping with field repairs and avoiding strange loaves, when an old man in layered robes and a pointed hood arrives in a cart filled with glass jars, copper tools, and something that looks suspiciously like a shrunken head. He calls himself Master Hegwald. He's not a monk, he's not a priest, he's not exactly a doctor either, but he is an apothecary, and he claims to know something about the sickness. You're summoned to the back of the chapel, where he's set up a sort of traveling lab. Herbs hang upside down from beams. Beeswax candles drip onto scrolls. Jars of powders and pastes glimmer like strange stars on wooden shelves. He eyes your leg first. The toes have darkened again. How long since you danced? He asks, tapping the sole with a stylus. 4 weeks, you say. He grunts. Could have been worse. You've kept most of it. You want to ask most of what, but decide not to. He sits you down and offers a small square of bread. You recoil instantly. It's wheat, he says, not rye. Safe, boring. You nibble cautiously. He watches. Ever heard of ergot, he asks. You blink. That's what this is. He nods. Claviceps purpurea. It eats the grain before you do, makes you see things, makes you burn, and if you're a pregnant woman, makes you bleed. He picks up a jar with something black and shriveled inside. It looks like a dried finger. This, he says, shaking it gently, is an ergot sclerotium, hardened body of the fungus, found in rye. You bake it into your loaf, and your loaf bakes you. You want to gag. He continues. The monks treat it like a spirit. The villagers treat it like a sin. But it's a fungus, like mold, only meaner. It's the first time anyone has said it so clearly. Not a curse, not divine punishment, just bad biology. Why doesn't everyone know this, you ask? He snorts, because I don't have enough jars. Then he leans in, lowering his voice. Thing is, we can use it. You raise an eyebrow. He pulls out another jar, this one labeled with a faded tag for birth. Ergot contracts the womb, he says. Too much and it kills, but just enough it brings life. He tells you he's used it to induce labor, stop bleeding, even quiet certain fevers. It's dangerous, yes, but powerful. Like fire, he says, burns the house down, or lights your supper. Historians still debate whether early apothecaries understood the dual nature of ergot. Some records show it being used medicinally by the 16th century. Others claim that was accidental, a byproduct of trial error and a lot of funerals. Hegwald, though, is confident. He shows you a crude diagram of a rye stalk, a smudged sketch of a pregnant woman, a drawing of a burning limb. We're dancing between miracles and mistakes, he says. And most of the time, we trip. Here's a truly bizarre fact. Albert Hofmann, the man who synthesized LSD from ergot in 1938, experienced his first acid trip entirely by accident. He touched a bit of it, then rode home on a bicycle. For several hours, he thought he was losing his mind. It's weirdly comforting to know that even modern minds struggle with what this tiny fungus can do. Back in the chapel, Hegwald gives you a small pouch of dried mint and valerian root. For the dreams, he says, they'll still come. Then more cautiously he adds, if you ever feel your foot turning cold or the ants return to your skin, you'll need this. He hands you a tiny sealed vial. What is it, you ask? Wine salt and ground beetle wing. Probably useless, but it makes people feel better. And that, you suppose, is half the battle. Before he leaves, he shows you one last thing, a tiny loaf of bread carved from clay, painted with silver streaks, and filled with dried rosemary. It's a charm, he says, for luck or memory. He gives it to you. Later that night, you hang it by your bed. It smells like soup and smoke and just the tiniest bit of fear. You sleep and dream of nothing. You never thought you'd set foot inside a royal hall again, let alone with this limp and a foot that still smells faintly of vinegar and moss poultice. But here you are. Well, not exactly a palace. It's more of a crumbling manor house that belonged to some mid-tier French noble who now uses it to store grain house officials and pretend he still has teeth. But inside, there are banners, velvet chairs, and a very long table filled with very worried-looking people. You're not here by invitation. You're here because someone sent for witnesses. Apparently, something strange happened in the king's court. A visiting scribe tells you in hushed tones that 3 nobles collapsed mid-meal. One saw angels doing backflips. Another tried to crawl under the carpet, screaming, "I must return to the wheat womb," The third simply drooled until his tongue turned black. No one died yet, but there's panic. Not because of plague, not this time, but because of bread. More specifically, a pastry incident. That's how he puts it deadpan. A pastry incident. Turns out a shipment of fine rye was gifted to the court from a provincial harvest. Someone thought it would be poetic rural bread for royal mouths. Except that batch wasn't poetic. It was ergot infected. Suddenly, the elite are convulsing. The queen's cousin tried to eat her ring. A bishop ordered a painting to be arrested. You're escorted to the manor's cellar where the offending loaves are stored. It's cooler here, dark. A few candles flicker beside crates of baked goods that now look less like food and more like fossilized curses. Greenish patches, hard as rock, crumb trails like something was chewing them from the inside out. One court physician is there poking a croissant with a silver needle. They say it was divine punishment, he says. But I think it's poison. You try not to roll your eyes. It's ergot, you say. A fungus. He stares at you. And what are you, a noble mycologist? You explain cautiously about your time in the monastery, the bread pit, the apothecary, your still tingling foot. He listens with the kind of expression normally reserved for barking dogs. Well, he says at last, we're going to hang the baker anyway. And he does. Not 3 hours later, a young man is dragged out to the courtyard, accused of seditious baking and ungodly crumb intention. You watch as they string him up while the crowd murmurs and pretends this solves anything. Historians still debate whether these outbreaks among the nobility were real ergot poisonings or exaggerated tales spun by desperate regimes. The idea of lords hallucinating in gold-threaded robes demanding their swords be baptized certainly tickled many chroniclers' imaginations. But there are documented cases, real ones, of high-born families falling ill after bad harvests. No one is immune, not even the king. Later that night, a royal advisor invites you to dinner. The table is half full. Many chairs are empty. You eat boiled parsnips and plain barley bread under candlelight while someone strums a lute sadly in the corner. It's all very unsettling. The advisor leans toward you. You've seen this before. You nod. I've survived it. He squints at your foot. What does it feel like? You think. Like burning from the inside out. Like your bones are boiling. Like your blood wants to dance without your permission. He nods, scribbles something in a journal, and offers you wine. You decline. The last time you drank anything from a court official, you saw a rat play the lute with its own tail. Before you leave, you hear whispers that the king himself hasn't slept in 3 nights. Keeps talking to the candlesticks. Ordered a full orchestra to be played for a loaf of bread wearing a crown. So now they burn the pastries. In a great fire pit outside the walls, court servants toss in all remaining loaves. The flames rise high. The smell is bittersweet, sour wrong. They offer you a bag of gold for your troubles. You ask for dried oats and clean linen instead. They give you both and a warning, don't tell anyone what happened here. You agree. But later by the roadside, you carve a small mark into a tree, a crooked stalk, a burning sun above it, a way to remember. Another strange fact. Some historians believe climactic changes during the Little Ice Age led to wetter summers in parts of Europe, perfect conditions for ergot growth, grain spoiled in storage, rye turned sour before baking, and the fires kept growing. You walk away from the manor sack of oats on your back, royal linen in your bag, and a crownless foot in your boot. It doesn't feel like justice, but it does feel like survival. And right now, that's more than enough. You're not walking this time, you're crawling. Your foot has swollen again. The journey from the manor back into the countryside wore you down to the marrow. You're curled under a wooden cart on the edge of a long dirt road, clutching your ribs and mumbling prayers that don't belong to any god in particular. That's when you hear the bells. Not warning bells, not alarm bells. These are pilgrimage bells. Soft, slow, swung by people on a holy mission, the kind that chime rhythmically as bare feet slap dirt and tired voices murmur Latin under their breath. A procession passes by. Dozens, maybe hundreds of pilgrims, walking slowly, some on crutches, others dragging limbs that look worse than yours. Every one of them wears a Tau cross somewhere, stitched into cloaks, burned into walking sticks, dangling from leather cords around their necks. They're heading to a shrine, specifically St. Anthony's shrine. You follow at a distance. It's not like you have other plans. After a day and a half marked by raingoat dung and someone playing of a harp with only 3 strings, you arrive. And you realize that for all the churches you've visited, this one is different. This one is alive. The shrine of St. Anthony rises from the hillside like a fortress built of hope. Smoke curls from its chimneys. Dozens of people bustle around its grounds, pilgrims lighting candles, monks tending to herbs, a boy carrying a lamb that may or may not be sick. The sick are everywhere. Some are singing, others are crying. One woman stands with both arms raised, whispering to the sky as if it's answering back. A monk sees you collapse near the steps and rushes over. They know the look. You're taken inside, given water, bread, barley, blessed non-fungal, and a seat near the fire. This is what they do. The Hospitallers of St. Anthony. They built hospitals like this all across Europe, shelters for the burning, the twitching, the cursed. Pilgrims would travel miles crawling if they had to, just for a chance to be healed. Not by medicine necessarily, but by ritual, by prayer, by touching the relics. They lead you to the altar. It glows faintly under candlelight, warm and golden. A reliquary shaped like a sunburst sits at the center, housing what is said to be a piece of St. Anthony's actual body. A monk kneels beside you. Touch and ask, he whispers. Your hand still stiff, brushes the cool surface. You close your eyes. You don't ask to be cured. You ask for peace. Later in the cloister garden, you meet a man missing most of his fingers. He's making baskets, slowly but beautifully. I burned 2 winters ago, he says, nodding at your wrapped foot. Woke up one morning and it was black. You nod instinctively, clutching your leg. He smiles. And then I got better. You tilt your head, but you lost the fingers. Better's not the same as before, he says. Better is just being able to wake up and say you're not afraid. It hits harder than any sermon. Historians still debate whether the healings at St. Anthony's shrines were divine, coincidental, or psychosomatic. Maybe people recovered because they believed they would. Maybe it was the diet, pure bread, warm beds, clean water. Or maybe it was the kindness and the consistency. Here's a strange fact. In some hospitals, monks gave patients fat-rich diets, bacon, butter, and wine, which unintentionally may have flushed toxins from the body. So while praying to relics, they were also eating better than many kings. Back in the dormitory, you sleep deeply. No nightmares, no flames, no lizards, just the sound of wind through stone. When you wake, your foot is still there, still damaged, but there. One of the monks gives you a small cross made from olive wood. Take it, he says, for when it returns. You glance at him. It returns. He nods sadly. It always does. But something is different now. Not your body. That's still a mess. But your mind. You've seen the fire. You've walked through it. You've watched it take people, and you've watched people let go of it. And now You're walking away from the shrine cross in one hand, barley bread in the other, and for the first time, you're not afraid of breakfast. You're hungry again. That should be a good sign, a very human one. But in your world, hunger doesn't always end well. Hunger means risk. Hunger means another roll of the dice. You sit on a mossy stone by the edge of a forest clearing, chewing thoughtfully on a chunk of barley bread from the shrine. It's dry, dense, and tastes faintly like hay and redemption. But it's safe, for now. The road ahead leads through the ruins of a once thriving village. You see it from the hilltop, first collapsed thatch roofs, charred beams, empty windows like eye sockets staring at the sky. As you approach, the silence grows. No chickens, no laughter, not even crows. You find the cause by the edge of the village square. A storage barn door swung open, and inside grain, rye, spoiled, rotted, mottled with black and purple growths that cling to the husks like barnacles. The air smells sour and sticky. You gag instinctively, step back. This village didn't burn the fields, they stored them. You wander through the houses. Bowls still on tables, spoons in place, blankets askew as if the people had just vanished. But they didn't vanish, they died. A few bodies remain skeletal, scattered, but it's the stories they left that strike you hardest. You find a crude charcoal drawing scratched into the inside wall of a home, a woman on fire, a loaf in her hands. Another shows a stick figure spinning with wild lines for limbs, clearly a dancer. Children's hands stamped in soot along the fireplace bricks. It wasn't sudden, it was slow collapse. Historians have traced similar scenes across Europe, small villages that experienced famine, disease, and mass madness. In some cases, entire communities disappeared, not from plague, but from starvation laced with panic. Some records show up to 20% of grain stores infected during particularly wet seasons. Ergo thrived in poorly ventilated barns and damp cellars. And when people got desperate, they ate what they had. You explore the town square. A statue once stood in the center, but it's crumbled, leaving only 2 feet on a stone base, probably St. Anthony. Even here, he watched. A hollow wind moves through the place. You wrap your cloak tighter. Suddenly, a sound behind you, a cough. You spin around. There's a boy, maybe 10, standing under a broken archway. He's thin, muddy, but alive. He stares at you without fear. "Are you a ghost?" he asks. You shake your head. He shrugs. "Most are." You offer him bread. He grabs it and eats like someone who hasn't had food that didn't hiss in months. "Where's everyone else?" you ask. He wipes his mouth. "Dead, or ran away. My brother ran until he danced into the river." You sit together in silence for a long while. Eventually, he says, "They said it was a test. From God." He nods. "From the bread." That phrase stays with you, because at some point the bread became the god, or the devil, or both. You lead the boy away from the village, back toward the shrine. It's a long walk, and you know you won't make it in one day. But he talks as you go about his goats, about a girl who swallowed bees, about bread that whispered in his dreams. You ask if he's scared. "No," he says. "It already happened." That's the thing about survival, it dulls the edge of fear. You're not stronger, just emptier in the right places. That night you camp under a willow tree beside a narrow stream. The boy sleeps with the olive wood cross under his chin. You watch the moon rise and try to count how many villages you've passed, how many loaves you've rejected, how many people didn't make it. And then you ask the question that everyone avoids. Why did it happen again and again? Why didn't they learn? The boy mumbles in his sleep, "Because it feeds on hope." That's it, isn't it? You hope the bread is clean. You hope this year the harvest will be good. You hope the mold won't come back. But hope doesn't kill fungi. Hope just keeps you eating. The wind changes, you smell the faintest trace of rot. Somewhere nearby, another barn waits. Another winter is coming. And the fire is never really gone. France has had enough. That's what they're saying on the roads and the churches, behind tightly drawn curtains. Enough of the bad harvests. Enough of the madness. Enough of the burning limbs and bread that talks back. You hear it first in a tavern near the border to Burgundy. They're blaming Satan this time. Again, the man who says it has one eye, a cracked mug, and the kind of laugh that makes other patrons edge away. He explains in a whisper, like he's handing you a secret. The church is holding trials. Again, only this time they're not after witches or dancers. They're after the devil in the rye. Inquisition reports have started piling up. Stories of possessed bred children shrieking during communion, whole convents falling ill after a single meal. The logic's easy to follow. Ergotism isn't a fungus. It's a curse, a demonic infection, a plague sent by infernal hands. You arrive in one such town, stone-walled, thick with incense and fear, and find the square roped off. In the center stands a cart piled with bread, and above it, tied to a post, is a woman with a wild look in her eyes. They say she baked the loaves, a boy tells you. She fed her neighbors on Candlemas. 5 of them are dead. 1 walked into the river, another gave birth to a spider. You don't know what part to argue with first. You push closer. A monk is preaching. The devil does not need your soul, he says loud and smooth. He needs your wheat, and once he has it, he has you. You glance at the cart. The loaves are visibly infected, black veins curling through their crusts like ink in water. But nobody's talking about the weather, or poor storage, or the wet spring. They're talking about Satan, because it's easier to burn a woman than dry your cellar. Historians still debate how often the Inquisition intersected with outbreaks of ergotism. But there are records, real ones, of midwives, millers, and even children accused of devil's baking. One woman in southern France was said to whistle into her flour to summon hunger. Another allegedly mixed bat blood into her dough. Of course, these were myths. But when you're hallucinating spiders and coughing up soot, myth becomes memory. The woman on the post begins to laugh. Not a scream, not a plea, just laughter. Sharp and clean and far too loud. I didn't curse the bread, she shouts. I warned you, I said it smelled like meat, but you said it was holy. Silence falls. Then someone throws a stone. The execution is quiet, almost gentle. They burn the loaves first, one by one, then the cart, then the post. You turn away before they light her. There's a river nearby. You sit on its edge for a long time, listening to the water run. Later, a young monk finds you and sits down clasping his hands. Do you believe in the devil? He asks. You pause. Sometimes. He nods. I think he's cleverer than we are. He knows we'll do his work for him. All he needs is one wet season and a hungry town. You want to laugh. You don't. Instead, you ask, what about God? The monk stares into the water. He gave us brains, he says finally. Maybe that was the miracle. We just don't use them very well. Here's a weird fact. Some scholars believe the fear of satanic bread actually led to better grain regulation in some regions. Millers were ordered to clean their stones. Bakers were forced to air out their flour. In some towns, official bread inspectors were appointed. Yes, a real job. It worked for a while, until people forgot. You return to the square that night. The fire's out. The post is gone. A pile of ashes, still warm, marks where myth became punishment. You take a stick and draw a circle around the spot. Then you walk away humming a prayer for no one in particular. The next village may not burn witches, but it will still burn, because the fungus doesn't care about sermons. It only needs rain. You're no longer in France. The houses are wooden now, thin and brittle, pitched at odd angles like they're recoiling from something. The trees are taller, tighter together. The winters bite deeper. The bread's different too, drier, simpler. Less salt, less spice, more suspicion. Welcome to Salem 1692. And if you're wondering what you're doing here, well, blame the bread. You've been drifting east over centuries and oceans, following the whispers of ergotism like a trail of burnt crust. And here in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the fire didn't start in the limbs, it started in the mind. You stand outside a small clapboard house with narrow windows and a sagging door. Inside, two girls are screaming, not crying, not weeping, screaming. Their names are Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, aged 9 and 11. They're contorting, thrashing, shrieking about shadows and pinching and terrible women who fly. Their voices are like shattered glass dragged across a sermon, and no one, not their parents, not the town minister, not the doctor, can explain it, except of course for witches. The Salem witch trials are just beginning, and you know what's coming: accusations, confessions, executions, the rope and the gavel, the psalms and the gallows. But what if, just what if, it wasn't all hysteria? What if, like France, like Germany, like the forgotten barn villages you're looking at, ergotism quietly feeding from the roots of their lives? A few modern scholars have suggested exactly that ergot-contaminated rye, consumed during a damp spring and stored in poor conditions, may have sparked the initial symptoms: seizures, hallucinations, crawling skin, speech loss, that the Puritans interpreted as possession. Historians still debate this fiercely. Many reject it outright. Others nod quietly and say it would explain the twitching. You see the bread yourself. In the kitchen behind Betty's house, a loaf sits under a cloth hardened and cracked. You lift it. It's darker than you expected, smells faintly of vinegar and damp wool. The flour came from a local mill, a rushed grind, likely damp, poorly sifted. You don't eat it. You've learned. But the villagers haven't. They don't want explanations. They want culprits. And in the weeks to come, they find them: Sarah, good Sarah Osborne, and Tituba women already on the fringe, already convenient. Tituba, the enslaved Caribbean servant, is the first to confess, but not to baking bad bread. She speaks of visions of devils of animals with human faces, and the Puritans, deep in their world of fire and brimstone, believe her. It spreads like plague. Girls accuse neighbors, men accuse wives, children accuse mothers. One dog is hanged. The testimony often includes burning sensations, things crawling under the skin, voices heard at night. One girl claims that she saw her tormentor split into 3. Another says she was turned into a mouse. You recognize these symptoms. You lived them. But here no one speaks of mold or fungus or rot. They speak of Satan. Again, you try to tell them. You show them a drawing of the ergot stalk. You describe the fire in your foot, the visions of lizard births, the dancing in the fields. They call you a heretic. You leave before they can decide whether heretics float. Here's the strange fact: 20 people were executed during the Salem trials. 19 by hanging. 1 pressed to death. Dozens more imprisoned, starved, shamed, all while the bread sat quietly in their kitchens, waiting to be eaten. In the end, the frenzy dies out. The court disbands. Some apologize. Others never recover. But no one ever says, maybe it was the rye. It's easier to blame witches than weather. You leave Massachusetts behind. You walk through a forest of red leaves and frost-touched bark, and you wonder, if no one listened in Salem, who will listen now? You're tired, not just in the bones, not just in the limp, but in the soul. You've walked through centuries, fields, villages, monasteries, trials, shrines, and hallucinations that still cling to the edges of your memory like cobwebs. And then always at the center of it all, like a smirking shadow, the bread. The final leg of your journey brings you back to Europe. Though the borders have changed, the flags have shifted, and the languages feel more knotted than before. But the soil, it remembers. You pass through a small village, nestled between low hills, where the roofs are neatly thatched, the cows are properly fat, and the children are dancing. Not frantically, not madly, just twirling in the fields to the tune of an old flute played by an old man missing 3 fingers. You smile, but something in your gut tenses. You've seen this before. You ask around quietly. The rye harvest was small this year, but they're grateful. A merchant passed through last week, selling flour from the coast. People made loaves and dumplings and cakes. The village baker is even talking about a festival. Finally, they say something to celebrate. You ask to see the flour. It's too late. The sacks are half empty, already baked, already eaten. That night, a boy wakes up screaming. By morning, he's blind in one eye. By evening, his sister has developed a twitch that won't stop. By the next day, the priest is speaking in tongues, and no one can find the mayor. It's starting again. But this time, you know what to do. You gather the flour. You burn it immediately. People protest. You ignore them. You find the rest of the sacks hidden in cellars, stored in pantries, and burn those too. You walk into the bakery, overturn the cooling rack, and toss everything into the fire. For the first time in years, your foot doesn't ache while you work. Your hands are steady. You bury the ashes in a pit lined with salt and rosemary. You carve the circle, you whisper the prayer, and you wait. Some still fall sick too late to stop all of it. A girl loses 3 fingers. A boy rants about angels who speak in breadcrumbs. The priest leaves his post and walks into the woods never to return. But it doesn't spread. This time, it doesn't spread. You become a quiet guardian of sorts. A nameless limping figure who wanders from town to town with a bag of herbs, a vial of wine, and a nose trained to detect the sour scent of cursed flour. People don't always listen, but sometimes they do. That's enough. Eventually, you stop needing to explain. You just gesture at the barn, the loaf, the fevered child. They nod. They've heard the stories by now. Here's the strange thing: over time, ergotism fades. Not because the fungus disappears, but because people change. New milling techniques, better grain storage, climate shifts. Wheat replaces rye in many regions. The bread becomes less dangerous and more boring. Historians still debate whether the fungus truly vanished or whether we just learned to fear it properly. But as you sit by a fire, one crisp evening, watching steam rise from a fresh barley loaf, you know this. You remember? You remember what the fire feels like in your veins. You remember the hallucinations, the screams, the walking, the silence after the burning ends. And now as the stars blink above you, soft and distant, you close your eyes and finally rest. No twitching, no dancing, no fear, just sleep. You close your eyes now, dear listener. Let the fires fade. Let the bread fall still. You've wandered across centuries, through crumbling villages and holy shrines, fog-filled forests, and torchlit courts. You've walked beside hallucinating peasants, twitching nobility, dancing children, and weeping monks. You've eaten the bread that burns from within and watched as the world tried again and again to explain away its madness. Sometimes they called it the devil, sometimes a punishment, often a sin. But beneath the ashes and the hysteria, it was always the same thing: a fungus, a rot, a hunger. And even when the mold was gone, the fear stayed behind. The memory lingered, baked into the walls, carved into doors, whispered at night. You learned that the fire isn't just in the bread, it's in the desperation, the cold winters, the wet grain, the aching hunger that makes people bite down and pray the loaf won't betray them. But you also learned how to stop it. You learned that burning is not always destruction. Sometimes it's mercy, a line drawn in ash. Now as you drift into sleep, you're safe. The candles have burned low. The shadows outside are just wind. No footsteps on the roof. No bread under the bed. Just the quiet knowledge that the fire has passed for now. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. Rest.